We are in the App Lab lessons. So this is Unit 5, Chapter 1, Lesson 4, Controlling Memory with Variables. So let me just show you. When you log in, you're going to not click on Express Course. You're going to click on the CSP Unit 5. And so this is Chapter 1, and on the left-hand side, it says Lesson 4. So I'm going to ask you to watch the video in Part 3, and then I'm going to go through Lesson 4 with you. So here's the video. I am including a link. You can click it in code.org, or you can click it in this link here as it pauses for you. And then you're going to click Continue, and we're going to hop into Lesson 4. So this is an extension of variables, and instead of using the Sprite Lab, we're using the App Lab. So here's the variables toolbox. So let's get started with the most basic example of using and controlling a computer's memory with variables. So if you remember variables in coding, you can change the value over time for things like the score. The toolbox, that's over here, has a couple of new commands for working with variables. As we go through the lessons, they only expose the things that you need, but if you went into the App Lab itself, you would have access to a whole bunch of other coding blocks. And this is in JavaScript. So right now they're giving us the blocks, or we can look at the text, and this is what JavaScript looks like in text. JavaScript is probably one of the more popular languages used in computer coding. So let's see. We've given you some starter code that does three things. It creates a variable called score, it assigns the value 0 to score, and it displays the value of score to the console. See hint below about the quotes. So do this. We're going to add another variable, assign it a value, and then display it to the console. Use the starting code as a model for what you need to create now. All right, so if I leave it in text, I would just continue to write in text. If I go over here and I go back to blocks, I can just copy what they're doing. So I'm going to hide this. And down below, this is where your console is. So if I click on run, automatically it says var, which means the variable's name is score, and you can type in here and change that. And then on the next line it says score equals, and it assigns the value. So we have var score 0, and then in the console log it's going to print down here when you run when this happens, and it's going to say, now in the white part, see how it's in quotes? It's going to print whatever you put in here. So it says the value of score is, and see how it says a quote there, and down here it has a quote too. And then in the next line they wrote console log score with no quotes. So if you want to write your own words, you put it in quotes. If you want to write a value assigned to something else you've named in your code, you don't put quotes. Okay, so this says value of score is 0 because we assigned it to 0. So now what we need to do is create a new variable by dragging out the var block. So let's do that. I'll drag that out and change the name of the variable from the default X to lives. I'm just going to click in here and type in lives. You should do the same in your code.org window. And up here it even shows you what you should be doing. Set the value of lives to be 3. So when I'm going to set it, I take this here. So it was X, but we changed it to lives. So I'm going to change that in here to lives. And it says start at 3. Okay, so we said our variable is being established. It's called lives, and the variable's value is being established at 3. Now add a console log message to show the value of lives. So I'm going to drag this over, and I'm going to say the value of lives is. I'm going to drag another one over just like they did that says lives, and I'm going to take the quotes off because I want the actual value. I don't want it to say lives. I want it to give me the value for that variable. Now, if I accidentally did this and capitalize lives, that's going to make a difference. It's not going to match exactly. Whenever you name a variable, it has to match exactly. Same spelling, same cases, everything. All right, so this is what it should look like when I press run. So I'm going to press reset here, and I'm going to press run. And down here, my console log says the value of score is 0, the value of lives is 3, which matches exactly. So that means I'm done. So I'm going to click on Finish. And it says, are you finished? Yes, I am. In the App Lab lessons, it does not talk you through it doesn't check to see if your work is right. It's asking you to check it yourself. All right, so let's go on to Lesson 4, Part 5. And this is controlling memory with variables. So we are going to do this. We're still in the App Lab. We've given you some code with some errors in it. Look at the error messages and try to figure out the problem. Run the program, locate and fix the error. When you get it right, the output to the console should look like this. As a reminder, App Lab gives you hints about errors in 2 ways. Hover your mouse over the yellow triangles or red squares right here next to the numbers in the code to see what they say. As usual, the debug console will also tell you about any errors. So if I click up here, if I click on Run, so this yellow, it says apples is defined, but it's not called in your program. The red one says apples hasn't been declared yet. Oops, we can't figure out what apples is. Perhaps you meant the string apples. The string apples would mean like a line of text, not a variable name. And the next one says orange is defined, but it's not called. And then it says oranges hasn't been declared yet. Down here in the console log in red, we've got this error message. So each number here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's the line number. So down here it says line 2. Oops, we can't figure out. So that means line 2 right here, we can't figure out what apples is. Remember, in lesson 4, I was mentioning the variable name has to be exactly the same. So see if you can figure out what all the errors are. Give this a pause and fix it yourself, and then come back and I will explain. All right, so if you notice, this says apples, APPLES, all lowercase, and this is a capital A and only 1 P. So I'm going to change this to a lowercase a and add a P. So now they match. Same thing with oranges. This is a capital O and a lowercase o. So I'm going to change so they match. You can do it whichever way you want. Make them both lowercase, or I'm going to make this one uppercase. So if I do that, it should match and change. Now, if you'll notice on lesson 4, we did var x in the first line and then x equals on the next line. And here it uses var apples equals 7. So all together in one line, we're defining the variable as apples and we're assigning it a value of 7. So this one line of code does 2 things. And remember, you only use var one time when you're going to establish the name of the variable the very first time. So if I run this, I have no yellow triangles, no red squares, and I have a 7 and a 13 down here in my console, which matches, which means I have done it correctly. So I'm going to move on. The other thing to notice is that this whole time we are in the coding mode. And as I go to say that, now code and design are missing. So we're going to debug variables. This is lesson 4, part 6. There's a simple command called write in the UI. Remember what UI stands for? You said user interface, you're correct. So the user interface controls toolbox. That is a fast and easy way to display text in the app itself. The way you use it is very similar to console log. Let's debug another problem only using write instead of console log. So let's imagine we're making an app. This is our app screen. The write command is going to show up over here. The console log is going to show up down here. Console log is just for the coder to see what's happening with the code and any messages that you're asking it to print over here. The write is actually going to show up on the screen, so the user using the app is going to see the message. So if I click run, right away there's errors in here. We've got a yellow triangle and a red square. It says var score equals, and so let's see what it says. Error line 5, syntax error, unexpected token. Write the value of lives is. And there's a simple command called write. Let's say you may have already run into this problem, but it's worth mentioning again. To display the value of a variable, you should not use quotes. Notice the difference between the 2 statements. The comments next to each line explains the differences. So write quote score will display the word score, S-C-O-R-E. And write parentheses score will retrieve the value of that variable and display it. So let's do this. To solve these problems, you should only add or remove quotation marks. That's all we're going to do. Run the starter code, locate and fix the problems. Okay, so it says var score equals 7, write on the screen the value of score is, and write score. I don't want the word score, I want the value of score. So I'm going to take those quotes off. Var lives equals 20, write, and I want the text, the value of, so I'm going to put that in quotes. And notice it turns blue when you put quotes around it. So if it's in blue, it's quotes. If it's black, it's the value. So I'm going to take the quotes off of this one because I want that value. So let's run it. The value of score is 7. The value of lives is 20. So we want to make the app display what's shown at the right by only adding or removing quotation marks from the code given. So that's it. So it's a little bit similar to the Sprite Lab. Do you remember what you do to display it to the screen in Sprite Lab? They have a command called print. So print is what gets you to display on the screen in Sprite Lab, but we're in App Lab for this lesson, and it just uses the code write. Or if you want it down the console log, console.log. I'm going to click on finish. And yes, I'm done. I matched. I did exactly what it told me to do. All right, so the lesson was Unit 5, Lesson 4, or Chapter 1, Lesson 4, to complete 4 through 6. And you should have started out by watching this variable video. And that's all I'm going to show you in the App Lab for now.